In the meantime, I was also trying to listen to some stories of Christians who had reverted or converted to Islam, or even atheists that converted. Trying to see, why they converted. What is the reason for them? The reason also for that was because my American dad, I assume he wasn't too aware of what was in the Quran. He was aware of some things, but we didn't talk too much about the Quran. He never really attacked anything in the Quran. There was never ever any argument made against the Quran, and neither by my American mom. The conversations were always about Jesus and the Bible. So for me, the main source of learning about the Bible or Jesus were them. But about the Quran or Islam, I still have to find this on my own. So this is why I was trying to still search and trying to find these videos. In that time, I was also listening to Jeffrey Lang. He was a Catholic who has first become an atheist, and then he became a Muslim later on. So I actually went through his story, and I'll put a link to the video of his story if anyone's interested. Out of a lot of Muslims, a lot of people that I heard, his story really connected with me. He talked about this story of Adam and Eve from the Quran. At that time, I actually didn't even know that story was in there because, I hadn't read the Quran myself. He explained the story, he says, in the second surah, the second chapter of the Quran. And Jeffrey Lang goes over this, and he was like, so God creates Adam and Eve, and the first thing, before he's starting to create Adam, the angels ask God, why are you creating him? Why are you creating a human? This being is going to create a lot of bloodshed and corruption in the world. We don't know why you're creating him. It was very surprising to him, and it was surprising to me. I was like, really? An angel is asking God, questioning God about, the creation of a human being. And it seemed like they knew that this human was capable of a lot of sin, a lot of corruption, a lot of bloodshed. But the story goes on, and God says, you don't know what I know. It says that Adam and Eve are created, then first Adam is created, then God says to name different things. At least in the Quranic version of the story, God just asks Adam to name a few things, and Adam names them. And that over there was an indication to the angels that, so this being human, you can see that they are capable of learning, they're capable of improving. While they are capable of bloodshed, they are capable of also following something. They're also capable of doing something that you can't do. And of course, in that story, the God asked angels to name those same things, and they said, we don't know. We can't name anything. You are the only one who knows everything. And then Adam was able to do it. So this is why he's creating humanity. But anyway, so the main part of the story comes where Adam and Eve eat the apple. So in this story, God says to Adam and Eve, okay, there's a tree right here. Don't eat the fruit of this tree. Interestingly, it never said anything about the tree. It's just some tree. And Adam and Eve both ate the fruit. It doesn't say that whole story about Eve eating first or Adam coming in or something. It just says that both ate it, and because Satan had played a role in that. Again, the story about how Satan manipulated the woman or something like that was not in there. And then after they ate, they realized, of course, their sin. God, of course, talked to them. And right after that, God actually teaches them how to ask for forgiveness. And Adam and Eve both asked for forgiveness, and God forgave them. Right there, that actually happens. They both committed a sin, and they both asked for forgiveness, and it's done. But the thing is, in the Bible story, which of course I read in Genesis 3, it wasn't like that. It was very different. Specifically because it doesn't look like they ever asked for forgiveness from God. And there were actually a lot of, repercussions or consequences or punishments given because of those sins. For example, in the Bible story, it goes on to say, that the earth is going to be cursed, and the woman is going to be cursed, and she's going to have pain in childbirth. This was mainly the contrast for me in the story of Adam and Eve in the Quran and in the Bible. Of course, I then started to ask my American dad about it, and he said, yes, that is true. This is where the sin started. That's why we are sinful. We are more inclined towards sin, and of course, there were other verses that he showed me in the Bible that actually showed that we humans, us, are more inclined towards sin than good. For me, that was kind of interesting because it basically said that everyone who is born is a sinner, even kids, even babies, and it was a new concept for me. And basically, we are condemned to hell right away at that time. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And the reason I should explain why we're talking about this is because it then connected with the blood sacrifice. That blood sacrifice is needed for everyone. Because what I was asking, one of the questions I was asking about blood sacrifice, I was like, okay, well, what about people who don't accept Jesus, or for example, who never hear about Jesus, or for example, people who were in the old times who were not Jewish or who were not living in the Jewish lands? What about them? What about all those people? Did Jesus pay for all their sins? They never accepted him. And my American dad was basically explaining that, everyone is a sinner. They're born sinners, just like that. I never really agreed to that part. I couldn't really understand that how God is fair, such a good judge that he has to ask for a penalty for sin, but somehow he's fine letting different humans just be going to hell for no reason, because, well, they never hear the message and they're basically going to hell. I should also state that this was a similar question that was asked Jeffrey Lang in one of the videos where he was apparently giving a lecture in a university, and one of the people asked, like, well, what about this original sin? And Jeffrey Lang responded that, yes, there is no concept of original sin in the Quran. There is no concept of original sin in the Islam. And that really is one of the biggest starting point. The actual difference in Christianity and Islam, according to him, was that it began at Adam and Eve. The reason for blood sacrifice, the reason for this original sin, all of that actually began right there. It's not at the culmination where Jesus is paying for that. It's actually at the beginning. And that was really interesting. And I was like, okay, so then I have to start there. I have to start looking at the beginning. So I basically then asked my American dad, I was like, okay, I get it that Adam and Eve sinned. They had to be punished. I get that. Why are they punished? And not only them, but also all of humanity after? Like, what is happening here? I mean, I was like, okay, when they committed this sin, when they ate that fruit, it must have done something significant. It could be their genetics, it could be something that might have happened completely different about humanity itself from the core. And I was like, it's not clearly stated anywhere about that. And I think that's a pretty big leap to think like that. And more importantly, why is Adam and Eve and their descendants are being punished for example, this pain in childbirth, and then cursing the earth because of that, and so that everyone else has to do this? And I also thought more about it, and actually I was like, is it okay for God to punish others for someone's sin? Of course, as I had thought about from the concept of the Quran, it was completely wrong, but I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to use Quran to judge the Bible or the Bible to judge the Quran. I can't do that because they're two separate books. And I need to see if the Bible states anything like that. So I searched through it, and I found out that in Deuteronomy, it talked about that sons or descendants will not be punished for their father's sins. And I was like, okay, so God is very clearly stating that in the Bible, in the Old Testament. So how can then he be expecting the descendants to be punished because of Adam and Eve's sin? Why is that the case? For me, that was this point that never got settled while we were conversing together. We went over it many, many times. We even drew some pictures and went over like what really happened there, and how it affected humanity. For example, it affected them to sin more. It basically affected them completely from the core level or not. But that point never really got settled because I didn't really get the answer for this question. That why is everyone else being condemned? And how would that make God fair? How would it be fair for us if we're already pushed towards sin from the beginning? Because we didn't choose that. Adam and Eve did. I did not choose I did not choose to eat the fruit. And my American dad was saying, and I think it is also quoted in the epistles again, is that if you were there, you would have done the same thing. That anyone else, if they had been there, they would have done the exact same thing. They would have eaten from the fruit. And Adam is basically a role, or Adam and Eve is basically a role model of humanity, and they did that. And I'm like, yeah, but they're still individuals. They are making their own choices. How are us, as their descendants, condemned right away? That we're basically being born more inclined towards sin because God is making this. And it's like, well, no, that's not the case. It's because of us. And I'm like, yes, but not really because of us, because of Adam and Eve. So that was really a conversation that kept on going for a while in multiple different sittings. But we never really got to that conclusion to that. Which also didn't conclude the issue about the blood sacrifice also.